Welcome to Non-Beta Alpha. I'm Ryan Morfin. On today's episode, we have Penny Althaus, CEO of USA Rare Earth, talking to us about the supply chain glut in rare earth minerals. This is Non-Beta Alpha.
I guess I didn't know. I guess I didn't know.
Penny, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. Good to be here.
So you're an investor and a miner in rare earth minerals. Can you share with our listener base what are rare earth minerals, why are they important, and why is there a geopolitical race going on globally?
Yeah, I mean, rare earths are an extremely ubiquitous part of all advanced manufacturing or technology manufacturing in today's day and age. Several years ago, I had not heard of too much about rare earths myself. I was not that familiar with it. And being involved in this sector and in this company for the past few years has given me an education, of course. And I mean, I was staggered to hear that 50% of all imports into the United States contain rare earth elements. And it runs the gamut from the consumer electronic devices that we use every day, our cell phones, our laptops, most communication devices, medical equipment. So there's a tie-in with COVID, which we can touch on at your discretion. Electric vehicles, defense equipment. So pretty much anything or everything high tech today has a rare earth element or critical minerals contained within them.
And what are some of the names of some of the more important rare earth? Like I know there's lithium for batteries, but what else is kind of considered in this category critical?
Yeah, so lithium is a separate category to battery material. The rare earths, there are 17 rare earths. The four, let's call it key rare earths that we're focused on at our company, the four rare earths that go into the permanent magnets, and these are the magnets that are found. There are a number of them in the back of your cell phone or in an iPad. But if you look at an F-35 Striker jet, you've got about a ton of rare earth magnets in those. And we've got two heavy rare earths and two light rare earths as part of the permanent magnets. You've got dysprosium and terbium are the heavies, and then you've got neodymium and praseodymium as the two light rare earths. So those would be sort of key rare earths that are the focus.
And you use these in, I guess, in military applications as well. But historically, where has the United States sourced the rare earth for supply chain?
Yeah, and that's the shocking part. We've been securing those materials from China. So China controls the rare earth sector and has done so for the past 30 years or so. And it was a significant misstep on the part of the United States, allowing China to have this control. And actually, this wasn't a question of China coming in and doing anything nefarious as far as stealing IP or anything. The US government made a conscious decision about 30 years ago to allow China to come to the United States and acquire the processing capabilities for rare earths. So just as part of sort of some background, you've got the rare earth materials contained in various mining projects, but once you extract them, you have to then process them, and they go through certain phases before they get to the magnet phase. And China, the thought process was, let China do the mining, let China do the processing. We don't need to do that here. We'll buy the materials from China cheaply. And the premier of China at the time, Xi Jinping, made the comment. He said, the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. And unfortunately, we weren't smart enough to understand what he was saying. And the Chinese understood that the future of manufacturing is going to revolve around control of the rare earth and critical mineral supply chain. So if you think about it today, Ryan, we cannot build, forget about consumer electronics and medical equipment, we cannot build the equipment that the US Pentagon or the US Armed Forces require, whether it's F-35 fighter jet, Tomahawk cruise missile, communications equipment, without going to China and obtaining those materials. And it's obvious to all that this should be extremely alarming. We've seen China use this as a weapon, if you will, as far as how it interacts with other countries. Back in 2010, when there was a dispute between China and Japan on the East China Sea. So China cut off rare earth exports from Japan for 40 days. Japan obviously being a significant user of rare earth elements for their high-tech manufacturing sector. That was stopped after 40 days, but in fact it was President Obama that first sort of made the United States aware of this, formed a division within the Department of Defense to handle this issue, but not much has happened. And we continue to be reliant on China for these materials. A lot has been made about the trade war with China and whether the trade war is really the impetus for China withholding rare earth exports. And that is a huge misnomer. Whilst China had been talking or implying that they would cut off rare earth exports, the truth of the matter is that China, under its Made in China 2025 mandate and its Belt and Road initiatives and others, it is seeking to control the critical minerals and rare earth supply chain so that it can continue its dominance as a manufacturer or the global supplier of these materials and finished products. It's the backbone of its economy. And in fact, China has become a net importer of rare earths from different countries like Myanmar and others. So with that, they are decreasing the exports to countries like the United States, Japan, and others.
And was it ever a risk that the Chinese were going to turn off the exports of rare earth to the U.S. during the trade war? How close were we to that, and was that ever some saber rattling that went down during trade negotiations?
Yeah, I think it was saber rattling. I think it would be paramount to an act of war. I can't say with any authority that would not happen, but it would be probably, aside from war itself, it would be one of the most significant acts of war, cutting the United States off from the ability to procure rare earths. But that being said, I mean, if you look at, as an analogy, the oil and gas sector and the reliance that the United States had for many, many years on OPEC countries to supply us with oil, and we had embargoes and we had price manipulation by OPEC. This is far more significant given the ubiquity of where these rare earths go. And yes, we're always under the threat that China can cut off exports under the guise of a trade war or for any other nefarious reasons. But I think even more importantly, just as a, sort of the natural run of sort of the course of things with regards to their business and their desire to maintain themselves as the global leader in manufacturing and exporting of goods, China is in a position now where it actually requires these materials for their own domestic consumption and can legitimately cut off rare earth exports by stating that they need it for manufacturing, and that would actually be somewhat correct. So we're in an extremely dangerous position here with this reliance on China. And it wouldn't just be China. If it was another country, it would be similar issues, not to the same extent, but reliance on one country for these materials is dangerous.
And, it's been mentioned in the past that in 2010, China flooded the market to really kill all the competitors in the rare earth mining industry. Where was the World Trade Organization during this period, and kind of how did that play out, and how does that set the chessboard for China to run the tables?
Yeah, so the WTO stepped in when China cut off rare earth exports from Japan. I think it lasted for about 40 days because the US and Japan protested this at the WTO, and they stepped in and China resumed exports. While I'm not an expert on these trade matters, one thing that I am aware of is that one of the reasons why China had to resume the export of rare earths was it did not legitimately need all of the rare earths for domestic consumption. So therefore, it was a nefarious act, if you will, to cut off rare earth exports. Now that has changed, which means if China were to cut off rare earth exports today, they have a legitimate case to say that they require these materials. There's a shortage of these materials, and they require them for their own domestic purposes. It is the backbone of their economy, and there's very little we could do about this today, which is why it's becoming an even more urgent issue.
And the U.S. government started stockpiling some of these after that incident. Can you talk a little bit about what DoD and DOE has done to start, making sure that there's not a critical supply shortage going forward? And is it enough?
Yeah, again, I'm not. There is a national defense stockpile, and there are materials still that the United States needs to procure in order to shore up its stockpile. There are magnets, the finished magnet products as well. The United States government needs to stockpile. Again, there's a limited amount that the United States government has. It requires approval from Congress, whether it's in the NDAA or other approvals from Congress to allocate monies for the National Defense Stockpile of these materials. That being said, there's no endless supply of these materials, and unfortunately, sort of the apparatus, the way it's set up right now with the US government, it's going to continue to require having a secure supply chain of those materials for many, many years to come. So it's not a question of stockpiling for 10 or 20 years and then sort of this complacency and saying we'll kick the can down the road. But keep in mind as well, Ryan, that US government accounts for low single digits of overall rare earth imports into the United States. We're talking about defense contractors, we're talking about the manufacturing sector, the direct impact this has on the economy, jobs, the automotive sector, and others is significant. So it's not just limited to the United States government. If you look at, over the past couple of weeks, the sanctions that China have put on, Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed, etc. I mean, the question is, where are they going to get those materials? And if we go beyond that, you need rare earths for the 5G network. Now that Huawei has been banned from installing the network, not only in the US but other countries, we have to have the ability to get a secure supply of these materials as well, which currently, again, China controls 100%. So it runs across the board, both for government, defense, and manufacturing in this country.
Well, and so help me paint a picture for our audience. Does China have all the mines for rare earth, or they're the only ones who started mining it? Or are there mines globally dispersed and nobody's been doing the actual infrastructure to do the mining?
Yeah, so finding rare earth projects or rare earth elements is not the difficult part. It's finding them in significant quantities that makes a project economically viable. And part of that consideration are the environmental rigors that companies in the West have to adhere to. And China, even by their own admission, have had a complete disregard for mining these materials and even for processing these materials. And in fact, just the last week or so, the BBC did an expose on this. 60 Minutes has done an expose on this. But the Chinese have not sort of denied this and have talked about cleaning up their act. But it has an effect on the bottom line for what the costs of mining and processing are if you have no environmental standards to adhere to. So China have sort of exploited those rare earth projects they have primarily in Inner Mongolia and have brought a number of projects online and quite quickly and in a significant way with a complete disregard for the environment. So it was seen as an environmental no-no in the West for many years. Now what's happened over the past few years is you're starting to see rare earth projects in different parts of the world sprout up. You've got the Mount Weld project in Australia owned by Lynas, which is a producer of Nd and Pr, neodymium and praseodymium, so two of the light rare earths. They may have some heavy rare earths coming online at some point in time. And you've got Arafura, which is another company in Australia that we're working with to assist them with their processing so they don't have to send the materials to China for processing. But really, these are a drop in the bucket for what the requirements are for the United States and certainly what the requirements are for allied countries, the EU, etc. So there is a race, if you will, worldwide to start bringing projects online. The Chinese are very active in trying to secure assets outside of China. So in Africa, they have ownership of a project in Greenland. So there is somewhat of a race. The Australian government has stepped in and has started limiting the ability for China to own or have ownership in or offtakes for the Australian rare earth projects, and that's part of the strategic alliance between Australia and the US. Canada, a similar thing as well. There are a number of projects that are looking to come online, but these projects, for the most part, will take many, many years to come online. We have to expedite the process. We have to assist with the supply chain and the domestic rare earth sector because, previously investors have been scared off by things like China flooding the market, which is not a possibility at this point in time, given that China can't actually afford to flood the market. They are already very heavily subsidizing their mine to magnet supply chain there. This is more now a case of being able to get production from non-Chinese sources so that the United States and allies have a viable, secure supply chain of these materials. And it's a concern worldwide. We speak to governments all over the world, and we're all facing the same issues, some more than others, especially countries like Japan that don't have their own rare earth projects there and are reliant on Australia, where they've made some investments there, and in the United States, they've made an investment recently in Africa. So there is this race, if you will, and I think we've got a 5-year window here to at least stand up a few projects worldwide. Otherwise, we've lost this race, and we will be dependent on China for many, many years to come. And Ryan, it's a bit of a hypocrisy if you look at it, where you've got materials going for clean, green energy applications like electric vehicles, wind turbines, etc., that we're sourcing these materials from China, where they've, again, by their own admission, there's been complete environmental devastation to water bodies around these mines and processing facilities, to the communities. People have been getting sick around these projects, yet we're putting these materials into, our electric vehicles or wind turbines. It makes no sense at all. And people are starting to wake up to this, and that's why the sector is starting to see a lot of support come out of Congress and bipartisan support. In fact, it's one of the only bipartisan issues right now in Washington, and it's good to see that some things are starting to move in the right direction.
And is there a special process? You talk about the expense. Is it really difficult to mine these? Is it you have to go through a special chemical process to extract and clean and purify? Is it a lot harder than, say, gold or silver or some of the other kind of we'll call more traditional elements?
Yeah, it's all about the processing to some extent. So if you look at MP Materials in California, which used to be Molycorp before they went through their bankruptcy, they are a miner of cerium and lanthanum, which are two of the sort of light rare earths, the lower valued light rare earths. Given that they do not currently have processing technology, they're sending those materials to China for processing, where China is tariffing those heavily. Lynas is also, they're doing their processing work in Malaysia and elsewhere. So it's really about the processing at this stage. One of the things that we've done after we put out our PEA last year with our upgraded resource, which now includes a significant amount of lithium, we made a decision that based on the test work that we had done around our processing methodology, that we were not going to send our materials to China, that it's paramount for us to do this work in the United States and in a collaborative effort as well. We've been asked by some of our investors, well, why would you be looking to help other projects with their processing? And the answer is simple. There's no one project or one company that's going to put China out of business or make a dent or somehow be able to take care of the overall demand worldwide for rare earths and critical minerals. And it's very important for us to have processing capability in the West. So that was the impetus for us opening up our own rare earth and critical minerals processing facility earlier this year, which we did in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. And in fact, we've made some significant progress on the method that we're using for this. And we're starting to collaborate with Australian companies, Canadian companies. We're currently talking to a group over in Europe as well, because this has to be a collaborative effort.
How does Europe solve for these problems? Do they have this better under control than the U.S.?
No, they're in a far worse position than we are. The EU Commission recently put out a report, I think a couple of months ago, that the requirement for rare earths is going to increase tenfold within a short period of time, lithium 18 times. They don't really have rare earth projects. Again, there are the Greenland projects, which people have heard in the news recently. Those need to further development work, so they don't have rare earth projects ready to come online there. There are a couple of lithium projects that are spread around Europe, but for the most part, Europe is in an even more precarious position. If you look at Germany with the auto manufacturers, you look at the big companies like ThyssenKrupp and others, these countries and companies are looking for alternatives to China, because we've already seen in the news about China withholding or reducing exports of some of these rare earths that are required for these industries.
And you mentioned earlier the regulatory posture of the U.S. makes it difficult to mine. Is it becoming a more bipartisan issue that we need to maybe relax some regulation around the mining exercise to incentivize private sector to come in and start producing this? or is the Republican Party versus the Democratic Party on two separate pages of music?
Yeah, good question, right? I mean, traditionally the Republican Party has obviously been more pro-mining and in favor of less regulation when it comes to these things. With regards to our project, we're on Texas state land, so we don't trigger federal environmental permitting at this point in time. And obviously, Texas being Texas, a mining state, an oil and gas state, things are a lot easier in Texas than they are on projects on federal land, where the Bureau of Land Management controls the environmental process around that. But the thing is here, and I don't want to sort of step into what other companies are doing, etc. But we do need to be reasonable about allowing projects to come online if they're adhering to environmental standards that are accepted worldwide. And what we do know is that China is destroying the environment and cities and water bodies around their mines and processing facilities. We have standards here in the United States. And I think what we need to do is make it easier for companies to mine while at the same time protecting the environment. And there are ways to do that. And we're definitely seeing buy-in from Congress from both sides with regards to looking how we can stand up a secure supply chain. And, obviously under the Obama administration, they had very strict regulations when it comes to mining, and that's changed under the Trump administration. Hopefully what we start to see is some normal middle ground that will allow other projects to come online.
And typically in these rare earth mines, is it amalgamation of different minerals that are all kind of consolidated together and you have to separate them out? Or do you ever find like pure play, europium, I can't even pronounce some of these, gadolinium, cerium? I mean, yeah, are they all kind of mixed together and you've got to filter and sift them through, or are they pure play mines?
No, they're generally they have a mix. So they're polymetallic projects, that have a number of different materials. Some projects skew more to what we call the light rare earths, like MP in California or Lynas in Australia. Our project is actually on the opposite end of the spectrum. We have a very high concentration of heavy rare earths. That being said, we do have to go through a process of separating these materials. But in the case of our project where we've got 30 materials, we're not going to produce 30 materials. We're not going to market 30 materials. So what we're doing is we're focusing on the key materials that are marketable, that we need for permanent magnets, lithium as well, and working on the separation and the optimization of those materials in particular. But we're all faced with the same processing challenges, and that is something that can't be stepped. There's no easy way to do this. There are different technologies that are being used in different parts of the world. So predominantly there's a process called solvent extraction, but it's big, it's bulky, it's not benign, it's a bespoke solution for one particular project, so it doesn't work for feedstock from other projects. What we've done is we're using a processing technology that's actually been around since the 1940s. It was part of the Manhattan Project. It's called continuous ion exchange. In fact, the Chinese use it to increase the purities from 99.99 to 4 nines, 5 nines, and even 6 nines. So for some applications, you require higher purity levels. It's a far easier processing method to scale up and to take feedstock from other projects. In fact, we've demonstrated for the Department of Energy that we can take coal waste from Pennsylvania and do high purity separation of rare earths using our processing method. So it's not a step that can be skipped unless one needs to send it to China for processing, which is not going to help us with our objectives here.
How many other, we'll call going concerns, any other businesses that are doing this, that are trying to, I guess start the development of these mines? Are you guys one of a few, or are you one of many? And is it an international or just a U.S. game? Who's kind of leading the charge at, going after this?
Yeah, well, I'd say the Australians are leading it outside of China right now. You've got some really good projects in Australia. Again, more skewed toward the light rare earths. There is one sort of more heavy rare earth project in Australia, which is not yet producing. In the United States, you've got MP Materials, you've got Ucore in Alaska, you've got the Bear Lodge project in Wyoming, which is also another light rare earth project. So as far as a heavy rare earth project that looks like it will come online in the near term, that would be our project. In Canada, there are a couple of projects there as well, again, more skewed toward the light rare earths. But we really need to get as many of these projects online as possible because, again, I don't see it as competition. We won't have a problem doing supply agreements or offtake agreements for our materials. In fact, one of the things that we're going to have to consider is looking at potentially scaling up our production based on the demand that we're already starting to see. And I think other companies will find that as well. So it's all about the economics of the project. You had projects that were economically viable back in 2012 when rare earth prices were 35% or so higher than they are today, and are not necessarily viable today. So that's the challenge as well. Economically viable projects, and we've got to get as many of them online as possible. It takes many, many years. I mean, our project has had over $70 million put into it to get to where we are today, and we're close to getting to the production scenario. It all revolves around processing at this point in time. We'd be very happy to see another couple of projects come online because this is extremely important for national security and for the economy as well. I mean, if you think about it, Ryan, if you've got $1 billion of rare earth materials, that translates into $1 trillion trillions of dollars of finished products. So you've got a magnet in your phone there that's worth, a couple of dollars, and a cell phone's $1,000, and electric vehicles and defense applications even more.
Yeah, everyone has one of these iPhones now, and there's tremendous amounts of rare earth, on the circuit boards here, and I think people take it for granted that that supply chain is not secure right now. So, one question for you, there's talk, and this may be medium term to long term, but there's talk about mining in space. Do you think that's a feasible option in the long term, medium term? What are your thoughts on that?
No, that's just ridiculous. I mean, we're trying to find ways to make mining on Earth economically viable. I think the cost of going up to space will be more than what our capex will be to bring our entire project into production. I mean, we've got about a $350 to $400 million capex to bring a 130-year mine life into production. I'm not an aerospace expert, but I think building a rocket ship and setting it up, I think maybe on the fuel alone, you could bring a couple of projects into production. So unless we have a fortunate situation or an asteroid lands on Earth and, fortunate if it lands somewhere where we don't care, and I don't see how that happens, and if it's big enough, it's a problem as well. It's nonsense. And even, options as far as deep sea mining for rare earths, I mean, you've got all sorts of environmental issues around that as well. I think we need to look at projects that we can bring online that can be done so in an economic way, that can be done so in an environmentally responsible way. I mean, one of the things that we've done at our project is, we've got in excess of 60% of the materials that have come out of Round Top will have sort of a clean green energy applicability to them. So we're using a benign processing method. We're going to be using renewable energy on site. In fact, we'll likely be putting a solar farm on site as well. And we're talking to a couple of companies that have approached us about that. And we'll be a net producer of power for the surrounding area. So there are ways to do it which don't affect the environment. Obviously, if there's a project that's situated on a sensitive, area, that's sort of a unique situation to that specific project. We've seen it with the Pebble project, which is not a rare earth project, but the Pebble project in Alaska, where there are environmental concerns, and it's been recognized by both Republicans and Democrats. But we have to be reasonable about the projects that don't have environmental concerns.
So, Penny, in season 2, we ask all of our guests a series of 6 questions. They're usually yes/no questions, but trying to take a survey of our conversations. And if you want to add a little context to the yes or no, feel free. But here goes the first question. If there was a COVID vaccine available today, would you take it?
Yes.
Who do you think is going to win the election?
Which election?
Oh, the U.S. election.
Well, I think it looks like Joe Biden's going to win it. But I think what happens if we go past January 6th, right? My understanding is the House will vote on it, and it's one vote per state. But I don't know if I see it getting there at this point in time. So I really don't have a crystal ball.
Third question. What type of economic recovery are we in? What type of shape is it taking? A V shape, W, U, L?
Yeah, I think 2021 is going to be challenging. I think we've been, and rightly so. I mean, we've had no choice, as of almost every other country. We've been printing money for the past year because of COVID. And I think we've got to, we've got to brace ourselves that at some point in time the chickens come home to roost. It was a necessary step. People needed it on an individual level. Businesses needed it as well. But I think we've got to do whatever we can to stimulate the economy, give people confidence to go out, work again, employ people. So I think, we've got to watch ourselves, especially in 2021. And, I have some concerns, but long term, I think the approach in the United States is a healthy one.
During lockdown this summer and quarantine, was there anything in particular that you accomplished that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, a great amount of family time, which, if you would have asked me a few years ago if I could sit at home and be at home for 6 months, I would have told you absolutely not. I wouldn't be able to do it for 6 days. But it has, and I'm sure it's done this with a lot of families as well, it's brought families together. We had a baby actually last year on Thanksgiving, so I was doing a lot of travel at the time and thought I wouldn't get to see, my daughter in her first year or a couple of years too often, and being home with her every day has actually been just the most amazing experience. So, thankful at least for some silver lining in COVID.
Are there any silver linings that you see in the economy going into 2021?
Yeah, I think we've gone through an absolute beating, and it looks like we've got the ability to come out of it. And I think that's a testament to how strong the economy was built up in the years preceding COVID. So overall, I remain an optimist. I mean, we are a country sort of built on opportunity and going out and making it happen. And we're not a socialist country sitting and waiting for people to send us paychecks or wealth distribution or anything like that. I think the American dream still lives on. I think if you go out and you're willing to work and sort of put your head to it and heart in it, I think we do have the ability to climb out of it. So if we look at what the economy is doing over the past few weeks, it looks like it's starting to rebound. And, to me, that's assuring because it could go a completely wrong way as well.
And the last question is there anything that you're watching or listening to or reading today that has been impactful on your thinking that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's been more personal stories. The news, I sort of take that in context, or with more than a grain of salt. In some cases, stay off the news channels for a number of days at a time. It became quite repetitive. But I think on the personal side, sort of talking to friends, my family's all back home in Australia. They've just come out of a 110-day lockdown, which we can't relate to that. It's been very trying on them, and seeing sort of the fortitude that they've had to come out of that and stay intact. I think the mental health issues that will come out of COVID are going to have a far longer effect than the economic issues. I think we're going to have to focus on mental health issues in this country for a long time to come. The impact on kids has been significant with regards to lockdown, remote schooling, etc. But to see sort of people come through it, I think it's a testament to people in general and to the country and to other countries as well, to sort of see we've got that fortitude and survival instinct to try to get through whatever adversity we can. So hearing the personal stories, the challenges that people are going through, I think it's made me a lot more aware of things that I have to be thankful for, and where we can help out other people as well. I think we have to be united going forward, because there are things, I think one of the things that COVID has shown us is, we can get into this complacency and life goes on, and, we go one day to the next, and all of a sudden we get hit by something that affects everybody equally. COVID, whilst there were sort of, groups of people, whether it was the elderly or people with underlying health conditions that got hit the worst, we all got hit in some form or another. So really, this should be something that unites us, not divides us.
Well, Penny, I appreciate you coming on today to talk to us a little bit about the, supply chain, crimp on rare earth, and we'll definitely keep an eye on it, and would love to have you back in the future.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching Non-Beta Alpha, and before we go, please remember to like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and our YouTube channel. This is Non-Beta Alpha, and now you know.
All price references and market forecasts correspond to the date of this recording. This podcast should not be copied, distributed, published, or reproduced in whole or in part. The information contained in this podcast does not constitute research or recommendation from Non-Beta Alpha Inc., Wentworth Management Services LLC, or any of their affiliates to the listener. Neither Non-Beta Alpha Inc., Wentworth Management Services LLC, nor any of their affiliates make any representation or warranty as to the accuracy or completeness of the statements or any information contained in this podcast, and any liability, therefore, including in respect of direct, indirect, or consequential loss or damage, is expressly disclaimed. The views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily those of Non-Beta Alpha Inc. or Wentworth Management Services LLC, and Non-Beta Alpha Inc. and Wentworth Management Services LLC are not providing any financial, economic, legal, accounting, or tax advice or recommendations in this podcast. In addition, the receipt of this podcast by any listener is not to be taken as constituting the giving of investment advice by Non-Beta Alpha Inc. or Wentworth Management Services LLC to that listener, nor to constitute such person a client of any affiliate of Non-Beta Alpha Inc. or Wentworth Management Services LLC. This does not constitute an offer to buy or sell any security. Investments in security may not be suitable for all investors. An investment of any security may involve risk and the potential loss of your initial investment. Investors should review all risk factors before investing. Investors should perform their own due diligence before considering any investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Investment products, insurance, and annuity products are not FDIC insured, not bank guaranteed, not insured by a federal government agency, may lose value.